Hi everybody, welcome again to another edition or another training session of EberVet Academy. And today we'll be talking about a few different things, but as usual. So we really start right at the beginning with a very brief history of the EberVet group, and then we're going to carry on with a bit of business basics. It's really going to be very simple, and there are some formulas and some numbers that I would like you to understand, and that will make your life a bit more interesting in the shops and in the clinics, and that you also understand the targets and why we actually have to make money. But always good to start off with all the presentations. We always start off the reason why we do things. We must never forget this, or otherwise we kind of don't have a compass of where we're heading towards. Otherwise we're going to get lost. So the EberVet way is a very simple but powerful way. And it starts with the way is to improve on everything. And then we ask the next question, so why would we want to do that? And the reason for that is to serve better. Now, very importantly, is that we always start with ourselves. The serving always starts there. And I'm not saying we become narcissistic, self-centered, self-indulgent people. That's not what I'm saying. When I say ourselves, and there's a reason why this is in capital letters, excuse me, is that there are 4 things that we need to understand about ourselves, and those things we need to give attention to, and those things need to be in complete balance. And if we do if we give attention to those 4 things, which I'll mention just now, and have balance in them, then we can do anything. And we can be much better at serving our co-workers, our patients, clients, family, friends in the community, and ultimately, and it's not ultimately, it's every day, we serve our planet better. So those 4 things that pretty much a human consists of or needs to give attention to. And the first is our physical health. The way we look after our bodies, which is a fantastic machine, but if we don't look after it and maintain it by eating healthy food, doing exercise, for instance, then pretty much everything else will just fall apart, and life is not such a good and a nice place to be. The next is our mental health, and when I say mental, it's more intellectual I'm talking about, and that is keeping ourselves informed, learning new things, which is a very high value in the EberVet group, learning new things. And that is what we get pretty much from our jobs on a daily basis. The next is our emotional well-being. If we are not in happy relationships, then pretty much our whole day is spoiled. So we need to be happy within our own skins. We need to be authentic. We need to be ourselves and not live a life for someone else. So we need to find out who we are, what we're about, and live that authentic life. And then the 4th is our spiritual component of our lives. Now, for many, that would be structured religion. For others, it could be meditation. But at the end of the day, it is about being present. If we're present, then we can also serve better. And that we can do by just being in nature. That could be very much, for me personally, a spiritual experience. But anything that gets us out of our minds and let us be present and not have thoughts into the future and thoughts into the past, which sometimes is necessary to have. But when you're with someone or you're doing a task, then being in the moment is pretty much where you want to be. And how do we do this EberVet way? We do this by innovation, by looking at things a little bit different, trying to figure out where is a win-win situation for us and the other, and then looking at a solution. Maybe there's a 3rd solution, my solution, your solution, and maybe there's a 3rd one that will make us all win. Also done by training, which is pretty much the presentation that you're watching at the moment. Coaching, which is really our HR and Barrett's territory. But we coach one another in any case every day. We just don't realize that. And then where the magic really happens is when we start to collaborate with one another. Is when we have ideas about things and we share those ideas and we learn new things to do things better. So very quickly, just the ultimate human experience. And it's a little bit more explained, not just those 4 things I mentioned before. So health, always at the top, very important. First thing you need to look after. We're talking about our emotional sector or component in our lives, mostly relationships with ourselves and others. We are social beings. Many people who are animal related shy away a bit from the social area, but you could be social with your animals. But this is part of who we are. It's in our DNA. Spiritual, we've spoken about. Community, and this is where the EberVet group, as an example, every year we do Mandela Day. So we're giving back to the community. We are working with other NPOs. We're working with the community, for the community, and we're giving back our skills and our time and our money. And then creative part could be very much a spiritual experience as well. And sometimes we think creative and fun things, they're not that important, but they are, because this thing needs to be stayed in balance. And if we all do intellectual, which is work, for instance, then we do feel that we're out of sync. So it is very important that we do schedule time to be creative. And that doesn't mean painting or sculpturing or anything like that. It could just be reading, being creative. It could be taking a photograph. Could really be anything. And obviously fun, I don't have to give you any reason or tips on how to do that. All of this is obviously supported by creating wealth. It's so much easier to have enough money. I'm not saying rich. I'm saying enough money to be able to do all of these things. Many of these things you do here is totally free, doesn't need any money. But life is just so much easier if you don't have to worry about where your next meal is going to come from. So one of my favorite wise men, strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value. This man has had great success in his career, and whether it's in the beginning or the end of his career, we don't know when he said these words. But I'm sure he still believed them until his dying day. Success could mean a lot of things to different people. It could mean a fancy degree, an education. It means money. It means things that you possess. It means people around you. It means lots of friends. It means all sorts of things, success. But when you're really valuable, it's when you start sharing your skills with others. That's when the value comes in. So let's strive to do that. Okay, then a quick brief history of the EberVet group. And many people ask me, so where does the Eber name come from? Well, we probably could have called it BeerVet, but that doesn't really work very well. So I did not think up this name. I stole this from my father. He was a builder contractor, and his company was called Eber Builders. So I kind of liked the ring of that, and it made a melody with EberVet. So I asked him whether I could use it, and he was delighted that I wanted to do that. So that's where the name EberVet comes from. So our very first clinic, or where we started, this was in Gordons Bay. I started this with Brenda Filer. She's a nurse at the Cottage Veterinary Clinic. She still works there. And this little house, which you might have seen on the way in Gordons Bay, is we bought this, or I bought this, and there was about nothing in it. It was made for a little house. And as you can see, long time ago in the good old days, we were not so security conscious. So this is kind of the only little picket fence we had, and the other side, I don't think there were anything. So this is where we started. And just to give you an idea of the technology or lack of technology at that time, look at this telephone. This was our state-of-the-art mobile telephone that we used. We had some interesting, as you can see, little patients here with nappy on. And then this little thing was confiscated from the harbor from someone and decided that Sam here was his friend and his mother. Cottage was moved then, and we moved the clinic to bigger premises as we totally outgrew the previous building. And this is where Dr. Mornay, the vet, has his clinic, the cottage vetting clinic. He bought it over from me, and this is where it is today. Now, the Country Animal Clinic was built in 1997, or we opened it then, and this was the sketch. I actually discovered this sketch the other day, all my papers, what I gave my father. And I said to him, this is how the building needs to look like. Luckily, he had a bit more technological skills than his daughter. And this is the building that he came up with a sketch. And pretty much what the building looked like and still very much look like now. As you can see, this was an open stoep in front until the Bergie started to sleep here. And that's why we then closed it with glass, and these were then the openings to the retail area and to the waiting area. This is when we were building, and as you can see, all these trees at the back started to lean over, so most of them has been removed, so you won't see them anymore. That's my father there, and there you can see all the rooms busy being built, and that took about a year for that to happen. We also had some well, I won't say tragedy, but there's been some drama wherever, and this was in one of those storms where this huge tree fell on and did some serious damage to the building. We also did some major renovations in 2018, which took a lot of strain from everybody because the clinic we had to work between builders and mess, and it took months for this to actually finish. But at the end, with a lot of convincing that this is the color that I want the building on to have, the building was then done. And Altona Animal Clinic was the next clinic we opened in 2003. It was then changed to a vet shop and then to the EberVet Pet Clinic from 2016, and that is where they are still today. We're also outgrowing this, so we probably need to build on or move. But that then moved, obviously changing colors to our clinic colors or vetting clinic colors as present. Onrus Vetting Clinic was the next in Onrus itself. This was a gallery. And so you can see the blue lines here. This is where all the partitions was going to go for a consult room and an office and a hospital and theater. And this is what it looked like then. This was an old where we started our old website. And then we started with the vet shops in 2005. This is where my hair was not quite grey yet. I should have stopped here. This is Lion Square and Village Walk. We opened it in the same year. Henriette, everybody will still know. There she is. She still looks like that. Hermanus was in 2005. Station Mall 2010. Stone Square in Stellenbosch 2010 as well. We closed the shop because the rental was just getting enormously expensive. And then Onrus changed to the vet shop in 2013. And that is where we still have, which currently looks like this. Then our very last of our vet shops is in Caledon, which opened in 2017. We actually bought that over from a previous owner and moved the shop to a better location. And that is in Caledon. So, and the other section of our group is the community veterinary care. So as you'll know, this is kind of my baby. And I go with my Land Rover and take everything with me, and I go do sterilization projects in faraway places, pretty much mostly in the Karoo, it's the furthest we go. I've also been to Aberdeen as well, it's about 700 kilometers away. But this is my passion. So 2008 we started that, and we're still doing quite a lot of work every year. So that's the ending of the history, or the beginning of the history, depending on how you look at things. Um, business basics. Let's start with that. I'm going to really try and keep this simple. Okay, so let's start at the top. Any business in the whole world works the same way. It doesn't matter if it's a multi-billion turnover business and whether it is someone in a street corner selling smileys or cigarettes. So your income, money coming in, they have all sorts of different names: turnover, income, sales, all the same thing. Let's stick to turnover. I like that word. If you take the turnover, which means that everything that you've sold on the day, let's make it in a month, and you subtract the cost of the goods sold. Now, this is where many people get tripped up by this word, because it's very important that you understand what this means. Cost of goods sold means that bag of food that you've just sold to someone. You got the money in. The cost of goods sold is the cost price of that bag. What is important, and we'll get to that later, is that it is not the stuff that you've bought that's sitting on your shelf. This only comes in effect when you move this from your shelf to the hands of your client or your customer. Okay? Now, if you've taken, say, you've taken this turnover, you've taken off the cost, what that thing you've just sold, taken it off in money, you are left with the gross profit. Very well-known word, gross profit, bruto wins in Afrikaans. The gross profit is used, that money is left behind, used to pay for your overheads. Because the cost does not end by buying stuff that you want to sell. These overheads, we're talking about rent, we're talking about electricity, water, utilities, talking about payroll, wages, okay, internet data, all those other expenses that you have to pay whether you actually have sold anything or not. You just have to pay those things. Okay. Now let's go back. So the gross profit, you take your overheads off, you are now ending up with net profit. And this is what we're interested in, net profit. Okay. This is just a different way of actually putting it in. So it's income turnover in a linear form, minus cost of goods sold, give you gross profit. That's used to pay your overheads. You end up with net profit. So this slide just gives you the top and the bottom, two ways of looking at it, and you can have this as a handout. So what is important here to remember is that cost of goods sold is not stock on the shelves. We were talking about that before. Stock on the shelves is just that. It's stuff that you bought, is sitting on the shelves. Yes, you paid money for it, but that is not how you calculate your business figures. Okay? So only when the stock has been sold, then that stock is called, it's got a different name, that is called cost of goods sold. So let's just have a quick look at turnover and income. Okay, we were talking about turnover, income, and sales. We're looking at the three different types of businesses that we have. We have veterinary clinics, vet shops, and the CVC, which is the work that I do, welfare work. Then the money that or how are you paid? How do you get paid to the clinic? You get paid in cash. You get paid in credit cards via SnapScan, MasterCard, Visa, whatever method that we use. You get paid by EFT, which is they go home, they haven't paid you, but when they get home, they actually pay you, or they pay you in the clinic itself, right? Online banking. And then the bane of our industry is credit. You make an invoice, you treat an animal, but you don't get paid for it. That is a big, I wouldn't say problem. We don't really have much choice. We would much rather have a business where we don't have credit, but we can't get away with it. But this is something that we have to control really, really well. So that's clinics. Vet shops, easy. Cash, pay with credit cards, all that way. and we never ever have credit. People do not expect to not pay for the products that they take out of the vet shop. It's a mind shift. And then I have CVC where I only do it on credit. Because I'm there the whole day or 2 days doing the work. I still have to go figure out who has castrations and spays and prices and extra things that I did. So when I get home, an invoice is generated and then it's sent, and I just hope that people will pay, which luckily we always do. So now we're moving on to there's two extra things that I need you to know as well. And that is here, these highlighted yellow bits. And that is gross profit as a percentage and net profit as a percentage. Because the previous ones we were talking about this, net profit and gross profit, we were talking in rands. But if we start talking percentages, then we can start comparing different industries with one another. So for interest's sake, let's mention it now. For interest's sake, a big company like Checkers or Pick and Pay, right? They don't do things really on credit, but their net profit, both of them, are roughly about between 2 and 3%. So from all the money that they get in, from everything they sell, that's all they make, 2 or 3% at the bottom here. Obviously, if you sell billions of a turnover, billions of stuff, then your turnover net profit still looks very healthy. So we're going to go through first how these percentages are calculated, and then we're going to look at clinics, veterinary clinics, and it is through the whole world is the same figures, which is interesting. And the difference between clinics and vet shops. So let's take an example. If we sold a product for 100 Rand, the cost price of that bag of food, let's call it a bag of food, was 60 Rand. That is what it cost us. According to our formula, we had to take off our selling price, the cost price, from the selling price. And we were left with then a gross profit. Okay, remember this thing is now called, is now changed in name, it's now a cost of goods sold. Gross profit is 40. We want to have a comparison, a percentage comparison, and we want to know what is this as a percentage of that. That's what we want to know. So, how we do this? Take the 40, divide it by the 100, and we times it by 100, and it's going to give you a percentage. So the gross profit percentage is 40%. That is how you work out GP percentage. Okay. For interest's sake then, a GP of, say, a restaurant would be roughly 75%. So every industry in the world as an almost particular gross profit percentage. Okay, so if you would take someone who is an accountant, for instance, their overheads is very little. They're not selling any product actually. They're only selling a service. So anything where there's services involved, this gross profit percentage is extremely high. That could be 100%. Because they sold nothing. Okay, where if you sell, for instance, very expensive products where your markup is small, then this gross profit percentage will be very low, which means that you'll have to sell loads of them to make the same amount. So coming back then, we're going to come back now to, just as a reminder, remember turnover minus cost of goods sold gave you gross profit. Gross profit's function, its purpose in life is to pay for overheads. So you want this as much as possible. Want to pay for overheads, wants to pay for those salaries, wants to pay for the telephone and for rent and all that sort of stuff. And we end up with net profit. So there are only 3 places that we can actually influence. The rest is a consequence of those 3. The first thing that we can do something about is the turnover. We need this to go as high as possible. The second thing we can do is the cost of the goods we sell. We want to have that as low as possible. The third thing is our overheads. We want to keep that as low as possible. And in the end, if we do all those 3 things right, we will get a high net profit. Okay? So let's look at veterinary clinics. Remember, same formula, same thing happens whether you have a clinic, we have a pick and pay, we have an auditing firm, or a marketing firm, or a vet shop, all the same thing. So the gross profit, interestingly, for veterinary clinics, and this is particularly in South Africa, because overseas the gross profits are a little bit higher because they do not sell a lot of products, they have a lot more services. The gross profit in veterinary clinics is roughly, in South Africa, 45 to 50%. Okay? For interest sake, and if we take Country Animal Clinic as an example, the overheads of Country Animal Clinic is roughly 330,000 Rand a month. I've divided that by 22 days, because that's how many days we trade a month on average. And it cost us then 15,000 Rand a day to keep the doors open. Whether we have sold one product, whether we have done no services, we still have to pay those overheads to keep the business open. Okay, so for instance, we are in a period where it's COVID, where hairdressers, for instance, has been closed for months. This has not changed, but there's nothing. Nothing came in, but they still had to pay this. So what do? You ask your staff, please, will you work for less? You're actually not working, it's being at home. I cannot pay you because where am I going to get the money for this? You're hoping that your rental landlord is going to be nice to you and not charge you your full rental. This has been difficult times for businesses because this still carries on where this has dwindled down to zilch. Okay. And then in the whole wide world, interesting enough, is your net profit is roughly between 5, 10, maybe 15%. Okay. Really high income clinics will get to 15%. And this is where you find all over the world. So we're just going to look at it a little bit different and take it as one huge column, which is all the money you got in, all the turnover. Once you've paid all your supplies that you've got from Lakato or from MCP and all the places where you buy from, you pay that, and it is 50% of your turnover is gone to pay your supplies. Remember, cost of goods sold was 50%. I've taken the higher end. Then you pay your salaries, which is roughly this percentage of a turnover. Okay, you have to pay it out. There's your turnover shrinking some more by 35%. Now you're paying your overheads, which is another 10%. You're going to have to pay in your overheads. Remember, overheads we actually put as part of salary as well. These two together are actually overheads, but just for interest sake, I split them. So in the end of the day, you have a 5% profit, and this is where that column has been eaten away to your 5% profit. But that's not the end of the sad story. Because your net profit comes happily bounced in, but here's the realities. You have to pay tax. South African tax, one of the countries with the highest taxes that we have. 28% of all the money that we've made, we have to give back to the government. So if we have 5% net profit, and of that 5% we still have to give 28% away, that's another 1.4% we've lost. Our staff expect bonuses because they've worked hard through the year, and we'd like to give them bonuses to say thank you. Many of us needed to go into loans, into debt, to buy into the clinics, to buy the building, to buy a share in the business. That we didn't have that money, we had to pay back in a loan. There's interest that we had to pay back over a period of 5 to 10 years. We'd like to have a return on our investments, so the money that we put into this business, surely we want a return on it. Otherwise, we could have just put it in the bank with not having to work at all. And we want to reinvest in the clinic. We want to buy new equipment to make us more cutting edge, to make us move forward, to treat our animals better and safer, more efficiently. So at the end of this, we are pretty much left then, in reality, not with 5 to 10%, but with 3.6% of net profit. That's a lot of work that you put in for very little return. So the question we often ask ourselves, is this really worth it from a financial point of view? And maybe there are days when we think it's not. But then we think, so what else would we rather do? Because we're not here for the money, remember. We're going back to the why. We don't want success so much. We want to be of value. And yes, we get paid enough to have the life we want. So who are the change makers in clinics? The people who, those 3 places, remember we were saying, who can influence that, can influence that, can influence this. Who are those people? In clinics, they are the veterinarians. They are the support team, which would be nursing staff, front desk staff, cleaners, hygienists. It's also the firm. You well know this is our company that does the, it's a veterinary business services that we have, separate company that we have called the firm. So we outsource a lot of the business functions to this company. And the landlord, the facility that we're in, also a change maker. The 3 places, remember, where we can have an influence. Vet shops are interesting differently. They are, works at the same way, remember, same formula. The gross profit here, interesting enough, is not, if you remember, it was between 45 and 50% in clinics. Here, they're much lower. Why? There's no services. Remember, the services doesn't cost as much money. A product costs money, okay? The overheads, I did not put an amount in here because that is very different from vet shop to vet shop. And the big difference really is because the landlords are so different, because we are in shopping centers. So some of these places are, some of them are very expensive, some are a bit cheaper. So the overheads vary quite a bit. And then the net profit, interesting enough, is about the same as the clinics. The nice positive part of being a vet shop owner is that this is at least money you have in the bank. When in a clinic, some of this net profit, yet you think you have in the bank, is actually not there. It's still with the owner, with a dog you treated and they never paid you. Okay. So the change makers in vet shops are pretty much the same, except we don't have vets. So we have sales staff. Okay, still have the firm and the landlord. And the same principle. So what can the change makers do in a clinic? Now there are only 3 things that really makes a business grow. And let's go through them one by one. We need to increase the value of the transaction. And the ATC is the average transaction charge. That's what that word means. And what it really is that every sale that you've made. Now this sale, let's go to a vet shop, make it a pure sale. It's a product that you're selling. How can you increase this sale that you're doing? Obviously, the way to do this is to upsell, to add on to the sale, to make it a bigger bag, convince the client that it's actually cheaper for them to buy a bigger bag, and to have add-ons. Okay, buy a worm tablet, buy a flea treatment. That's how you do that. Increase the value of your transaction. In clinics, it will be, if you do a proper examination, maybe there's a dental that needs to happen. Maybe there's an ear clean that needs to happen. There's maybe a nail clip that needs to happen. It's in the interest of the animal. The next thing is to have this client coming back on a regular basis. You don't want just a fly-by-night or once-off visit. You want them to come back on a regular basis to do all their shopping, all their pet shopping, and all their pet needs to come to the clinic or the vet shop. And then the third thing is that you want your clients to be a powerful source of marketing. You want the client to be so happy being at the vet shop and the clinic that they want to tell everybody that they must come here. These sheets these are handouts. So this gives us an idea how to increase turnover. And we've got the three different groups of people and some tips of what can be done to increase that. The same, remember, three things. Increase turnover, reduce your cost of goods sold, and reduce the overheads. And yes, some other expenses you can reduce as well. Again, in the three different groups. Change makers in a vet shop, same thing. Increase that charge, increase that transaction. When you're at that counter, remind the client, are your animal up to date with its deworming? Okay, it's cold. Maybe it needs a bed. If it's got a cat, do you have enough cat litter? Increase the frequency visit with loyalty cards. Remind the client, give the client a loyalty card. Tell them that if they come on a regular basis and they fill in these 6 boxes, they get a discount. And increase the client referrals. Okay? Give them such a fantastic experience that they want to tell everybody else. So here's a little reminder card to do upselling. Remind them, remember, an animal also needs fleas and ticks, needs deworming, needs pet food. Maybe it came in for cat litter and it could go home with pet food because they always need that. Try with a treat or a toy or a bed. Loyalty cards works extremely well at the vet shops. Again, these are now for vet shops, sales team, how to increase the turnover. Remember, we only had these 3 groups with landlord, and to reduce cost of goods sold. Reduce the overheads and reduce these other things. So the EberVet shopping experience of excellence is another training module, and I would like you to watch this after you've just watched this one. This is the next one you need to watch, please, because this will give you some tips of what that really means. It needs to be an experience of not mediocrity, of not good enough. It needs to be of excellence, because only then the client will tell their friends to come. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you soon with another presentation.